Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am Joe Szymanski. Thank you for once again listening in here on Elections Daily as I continue my Virginia 2021 interview series. And once again, we are with a lieutenant governor's candidate. Once again, this time we have the delegate from the 45th District in Virginia, Mark Levine. Mark, thank you for coming on with me today.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
All right, so Mark, this is the first question I ask this to anyone who comes on with me. Why did you decide to run in this race?
Well, I've been thinking about the Lieutenant Governor of Virginia because it's really the only one of the three statewide offices that isn't a full-time job. So we have a governor who works very hard and has clear and quite substantial constitutional responsibilities, and the Attorney General obviously has a whole office and a lot of very important legal and constitutional responsibilities. And then there's the Lieutenant Governor. So what does the Lieutenant Governor do? The Lieutenant Governor presides over the Senate for a couple months and then goes home and traditionally has done another job and maybe checks on the governor's health from time to time. I don't think that's all the Lieutenant Governor should be. I recognize that constitutionally that's all it has to be. To me, that is a bare minimum. And I look at the Vice President of the United States, and it used to be 60 years ago, John Nance Garner, Vice President under Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who said that the vice presidency wasn't worth a bucket of warm, and he did not say spit. I won't use the word he used. But the vice presidency under the U.S. Constitution is actually quite similar, right? Mm-hmm. They preside over the Senate. They don't even do that much of the time, and check on the health of the president. Now, with William G. Harding died, and Calvin Coolidge found out in his Vermont farmhouse, and he's like, oh, I guess I'm president now. That's not today's vice president. No one thinks that Kamala Harris is going to sit around, and check on Biden's health, right? She is going to be an active partner in that administration. Everybody knows it. And not only her, of course, but Biden was that way. Dick Cheney was that way. It's not just Democrats. In the modern times, we don't expect the vice president to just sit around and wait, right? Mm-hmm. We are electing three statewide officers, and if you're going to take the trouble to run statewide, you should have a full-time job. And what I want to do is really transform Lieutenant Governor. And my hope, frankly, is that after I'm Lieutenant Governor, it will be transformed forever, much the way the vice presidency has been transformed. I want to make it a full-time job, not just preside over the Senate for 2 months. I'm committing to going to every single one of Virginia's 133 counties and cities in my 4-year term and sitting down and meeting people and talking with them, going into diners, going into Southwest, going into Hampton Roads, going into South Side, going into Shenandoah, and really being that conduit where I can hear directly from people what's going on, what's on your mind, tell me about your parents. Are you having trouble? Are they having healthcare issues? Are your kids having trouble getting a job? Is it, do we need better community colleges? Do we need better transportation? Do we need better internet infrastructure? Is it the roads? What's going on in your life? What is affecting you? Is it fears of gun violence? Is it that undocumented immigrants aren't getting a fair shake? Whatever it is, racial justice and not being heard. I just think that the governor is a very busy job, and people feel disconnected today. They just don't feel connected to their government. They don't feel that the folks in the central government are listening to them, and that's a great role that I think a lieutenant governor can play, that I would play, in going out and talking with people and being that conduit, so that folks don't feel that Richmond is some distant place away. I would bring Richmond to people and sit down and chat with them and really try to convey their concerns to the governor, who would be my partner in this process. And I'm looking forward to doing that.
Okay, so then moving on to the next question. You've had a long history and career within the political range. So I want to decide, how did you first?
Very long.
Yeah, how did you first decide to kind of get involved in in American politics?
Oh boy, I've been an activist since I was 5. Actually, I was an activist before I was born. My great-grandfather shouted down with the czar on a theater stage. He got put in jail. My aunt was protesting in Mississippi Freedom Summer. She was actually registering black folks to vote in 1964. At 5, my first political protest Well, it wasn't really political, but I heard that cigarettes could kill, and so I took an entire carton of my mom's Kent cigarettes and ripped them all and threw them in the toilet to save her life. To save her life. Now I'm 5. I'm going to save her life. No, I've been protesting for causes really my entire life. I've marched for racial justice. I've marched against war. I've obviously I was a LGBT activist. I very early in the marriage equality movement, going back to the 1990s. Even when the gay community wasn't supportive of marriage equality, I was out there, writing the first bill in the country to have full same-sex marriage equality. That was in California, starting Marriage Equality California, starting the Valentine's Day civil rights protests, civil disobedience protests. I wrote DC's marriage equality law. I marched for representation in Hollywood. The thing that really got me more legislatively involved, I would say, well, there were two things. The major thing was, in 1996, when my sister was murdered by her husband, we needed help. We needed help in Tennessee, which is where I'm from. And it's a long, horrible story. But the heart of it is that my sister's husband killed her and then ran to Mexico with her 2 kids, my niece and nephew, age 2 and 6. And we tried to get the kids back home to be raised by my parents. And we had evidence that he killed her, but he was in Mexico. We couldn't try him. But we had evidence that he killed her, and we tried to present it to a court because Tennessee law at the time said that if you abuse your children, you can lose parental rights. And we were trying to bring the kids home. And we brought all this evidence about what he'd done to my sister. And the court said it wasn't relevant because under Tennessee law at the time, they said that if you abuse your children, you're a bad dad. But if you abuse your wife or kill your wife, that's not a harm to the children. The court even said, I'll never forget this opinion, that the Levines, my parents, were not alleging that the children saw the murder. And I remember thinking, oh my God, how tone deaf, how awful is this court? Most children would rather be beaten within an inch of their lives than to lose their mother. So I started, I wrote a new law. I went to my Tennessee state legislator, and told him the issue. And I said, what are you going to do about it? He said, well, Mark, you're a lawyer. You write the law. So I did. And I wrote a law that said that if you commit domestic violence, then you can lose your children. That if you beat your wife, you're a bad dad. Obviously it's gender neutral. There are cases where men are abused, although it's mostly women. But the heart of it is that I have learned the hard way the power of legislation to change people's lives. And 10 years later, when my ex-brother-in-law was expelled from Mexico, we used that law that I had written and brought my niece and nephew home to my parents. And, I had done that just as an activist, just as a citizen. And I thought I could do so much more as a legislator. And so that's when I ran for the House delegates. In fact, that's one of the laws I put forward in Virginia, and it's now the law in Virginia. I'm very proud of that law. Took me 5 years to get it through, but a law that says that domestic violence is child abuse. That if someone beats their spouse, that they can lose custody of their children. Very, very important. And as Lieutenant Governor, I can put forward a legislative agenda on all the issues I care about. And you're probably going to ask me more questions, so I should let you go and ask you more questions. But there's so much power that we have to change the world and make it a better place. And I think sometimes people don't realize the power you have with a good idea and persistence and creativity to getting things done. And I have a long record of taking on tasks that everyone else said was impossible, things like marriage equality, things like fighting domestic violence, things like bringing transparency to the Virginia House and Senate. All these causes that everyone told me were just impossible. And it's amazing how with persistence and creativity, you can get almost anything done. And I'm really excited by able to take that experience, working in Congress as well, and bringing it to lieutenant governorship. That's a long answer. I'm sorry. What was your question?
No, well, my next question then, and you mentioned this early on in your last statement. You've been a proponent of gay rights your entire life. I mean, you
Yes.
yourself are gay. So, but
Yes.
how did you get started in that movement and being a huge proponent, as you mentioned, very early on in
Yes.
the gay rights movement?
Well, so yeah, first of all, I would be the first openly gay, actually openly rainbow LGBTQ plus statewide candidate of any kind in Virginia history. It also would be the first gay lieutenant governor in any of the 50 American states. But yeah, to me, it's not about me being gay. It's about my fight for rainbow rights. And I have been fighting for them a long time, mostly because my parents, maybe partly it's growing up as a Jewish kid in Nashville, Tennessee. One of the things I learned as a little child is that sometimes the world is unjust, and sometimes people are just wrong. And just because everyone thinks it's true doesn't mean it has to be that way. And you got to remember, when I came out as gay, it was illegal. It was illegal to be gay. It was illegal to be gay in Virginia. You could go to jail for being gay. It wasn't that long ago. It was before Lawrence v. Texas. 20 years ago, it was illegal in Virginia. There were still sodomy laws. So, when you're up against an unjust system, you can either crawl under the covers and cry and or accept that you're somehow less than or a second-class citizen, or you work to change the world. And if the choice was between me being a second-class citizen or me changing the world so that all gay people, all rainbow people wouldn't be second-class citizens, I was going to change the world, because damn it, I was not going to allow this injustice to continue. So sometimes you just got to go fight and change the world and make it a better place. And I'm really very proud of my work. One of my first protests, I remember in the early 90s, I lived in California at the time, was a protest for gay representation in Hollywood. This was before Will and Grace. And I was out there on the front lines. I remember I even had a chat with a Hollywood guy. We did a march on Hollywood and I remember talking with this executive about how blacks used to not be shown on television. And they did okay with all these programs featuring, black families. And that I thought that there's a lot of humor in the gay community, that showing real people in real lives and doing it in a humorous way would be a great comedy. I'm not saying I founded Will and Grace, but I will say that I had this conversation before Will and Grace, and that was exactly the kind of thing I had in mind. And then in the late 1990s, there was actually something called the Knight Initiative, Knight, and it was Pete Knight, and he was a California assemblyman, I believe, who actually had a brother and a son who was gay, and I don't know what Pete Knight's issues were. He clearly didn't like his family very much, but he had a proposition called the Knight Initiative. It later became Proposition 22, to basically say that same-sex couples couldn't marry. And what was weird was that in California, they already couldn't marry. This is the 90s. Gay couples couldn't marry anywhere in the United States. And so it's a long story. It has to do with Hawaii had started a possibility of allowing it. They didn't want to recognize same-sex couples from Hawaii. But the heart of it is that Prop 22 said that that marriage is between a man and a woman, and that's the only marriage accepted or recognized in the state of California. And I got involved originally as a No on Night campaign. And this would be 1999. No on 22, Prop 22. And we actually had a big fight within the No on 22 campaign, because polls showed that the best way to fight this was to say, don't vote for this proposition. It's redundant. In other words, gay people already can't marry. Don't worry about us marrying. Vote no, it's mean. We already can't marry. Don't put it in our Constitution. And I remember being really upset by that argument. And I said, no, don't say, hey, we're second-class citizens. It's okay. You don't need to make it worse for us. I said, no, that's not the kind of campaign I want to run. I want to show real families. I said, let's start with a lesbian couple in their 80s who've been together for 60 years, with their family around them. Let's show real lives. Let's show gay couples. Let's show that we're no different from anybody else. We're just people, and we have families, and we love, and the people on our side, the No 122 side, were saying, well, no, Mark, that's a little radical. The polls are saying that we should just say, don't vote for this law. It's redundant. And I got so upset that I actually kind of gave them a ultimatum and said, look, if you don't show real lives, I said, we're going to lose this race anyway. We're going to lose. We're absolutely going to lose. The polls show we're going to lose. Let's lose with dignity. Let's lose by showing who we are as people. Let's lose so we can win to fight another day. And we actually took a vote on it. I remember it. It was 6-4. My side lost, and they ran this stupid campaign. Don't vote for this law. It's redundant. But the four of us founded Marriage Equality California, and we started doing the civil disobedience protests where we would line up couples to go to the clerk's office. It was actually in Beverly Hills because it was right near West Hollywood, and we lined up, and we had about 40 or so same-sex couples lined up that day, and that was a big civil disobedience protest because we would go in, we would try to get married, they would refuse us, and we would line up and again to try to get married. I do remember that protest. I don't know. How much detail do you want? I mean, I can go into lots and lots of detail.
I think we're getting a pretty good. I think we're getting a pretty good picture.
All right,
right
I can
here.
go on and on about all this stuff, and so I don't want to use up. I don't know how much time you have, but yeah, it's a long story. Anyway, the heart of that story is that we did it on Valentine's Day. That was to make straight people feel guilty, and it worked, and we got a lot of media attention, and the Valentine's Day civil disobedience marriage protests spread across the country until virtually every Valentine's Day, gay couples were being married all across the United States, and I'm proud to have begun that tradition. But then, just real quick, I wrote DC's marriage equality law, defended it in court, worked for Congressman Barney Frank, did all his gay rights stuff. This is a long, and then of course in Virginia, passing the Human Rights Act and making sure that we have full equality in every aspect of the law. It's like a 93-page law that I wrote. So I can go on and on here. So maybe I should just stop.
So, but you first really jumped on the scene then when you helped the Congressional Black Caucus create the appeal to the Bush v. Gore ruling. I want to kind of know what that experience was like, dealing with one of the largest national controversies until really this past election.
Yeah, so again, that was an issue where I saw something that was unjust, and I kind of jumped in to try to fix it. Didn't succeed on that one, though I think it was important that we did it. But the heart of it was that I was watching the proceedings in Bush v. Gore. I had been watching on election night, and in fact, I'm from Tennessee, so I knew someone whose mom was chief of staff to Tipper Gore and was calling in ideas and trying to write legal briefs for them. But basically, I had written a piece after the Supreme Court ruling in 2000. Really shocked me. Really, really knocked me awake. I didn't realize that the U.S. Supreme Court could just say to a state, don't count the votes. Throw away the votes. We're not going to count the votes. Bush wins. And that was really shocking to me because I have a very strong sense of justice and democracy. And to see the United States Supreme Court by a 5-4 decision say, yeah, we don't care how Floridians voted. We don't care. Throw away the votes. Bush wins. Don't count them. To me, that was something more akin to the Soviet Union than the United States of America. And so I wrote a pretty, I'm not sure what the right word is, trenchant piece, I guess, a strongly written piece. It's actually a Q&A. You can still find the internet. At one time, it had some 400,000 hits or something. But it's called A Layman's Guide to Bush v. Gore. That's what Michael Moore called it when it was passed around. But it basically goes through and explains the opinion and how incredibly lawless and self-contradictory it is. It does so with some humor, and like I said, folks can still find it on the internet. But that piece actually, because I was a California lawyer at the time, and it went viral. That was before I even know what going viral meant, and I was getting thousands of emails back every hour. This is before blogs and all. This is 2000. Anyway, so yeah, I got called in. The Congressional Black Caucus wanted me to draft a brief challenging Florida's electors, and I was proud to do so. And I want to be clear: there's no comparison between 2000 and 2020. In 2000, they refused to count the votes. They stopped the recount. They ordered Florida not to look at the ballots, not to see who the people voted for, because, as Scalia wrote in that per curiam opinion, he wrote to count the ballots first and determine who won later would damage the legitimacy of petitioner, that's George Bush, damage the legitimacy of George Bush's claim to be president. And I remember thinking, that's exactly backwards. You count the votes first, and then you see who wins, not you see who wins and then count the votes. 2020, of course, is entirely different. In Georgia, they hand counted every single ballot 3 times. They didn't stop the count in any of these states. They kept counting. They counted every single vote as they should. And so, yeah, those 2 cases couldn't be more different. In 2000, they should have let Florida count all its votes.
Okay, and in 2015, you finally got to really become an elected official. You got elected to the House of Delegates in 2015, representing mainly the city of Alexandria. How big of an accomplishment was that for you?
It was a tough race. It was a 5-person race. I was not expected to win. The other candidates were good people, and one was endorsed by the Washington Post, and one was the chair of the House Democratic Committee, and one was endorsed by the outgoing delegate, and then there was just me. So it was, I think I won it because I outworked the other candidates. I talked to more voters, and I think they understood that I'm going to be somebody who works again and again and again, very, very hard, very persistently, that I don't quit, that I have successes and not yet successes, because you can't fail if you don't quit. And people understood that I was going to really be a force in the House of Delegates for change, and for, not even being a Democrat that just sits there and sort of follows along, but goes out there and makes a difference. So yeah, it was a very big deal. I thought I was going to win. I did win, but certainly the pundits didn't think I was going to win. But more importantly, I think I've shown in the House of Delegates that I've done that. I mean, the Virginia Transparency Caucus, I don't know if you're going to get to that, but my second day in office, I'm already trying to transform the way Virginia's done business for 400 years to insist that every single committee and subcommittee be live streamed and archived, and all the votes be recorded, so the people in Virginia know what their government is doing and can watch us, and not have just lobbyists in the room. I think I've really done I think I've got a very good legislative record in terms of changing the way we do things in Virginia that I'm very proud of.
Okay, and moving on to the lieutenant governor's campaign a little bit more. Some of your fellow lieutenant governor candidates have taken some very strong stances on forcing the state Senate to take on progressive legislation. Elizabeth Guzman has said that she will, force progressive legislation to the floor. Sean Perryman has said that he will support primary challenges to these blue dog senators who are not letting the legislation get passed. What do you have any comment or plans on having the Senate take on more progressive legislation that comes from the House?
Well, the Senate definitely needs to consider more progressive legislation, and I think the best way to do that is just talk one-on-one with people to find out what their issues are, to work them past, to work senator to senator, individual to individual. At the end of the day, what passes the Senate needs 21 votes. Obviously, as lieutenant governor, you get 20, and I would cast the deciding vote. But, you can't force someone to vote your way. But what you can do is persuade them, and go out there and show them all the arguments, and sit down and chat at length and try to deal with every issue they can think of. And yeah, if folks don't listen, sometimes there has to be primaries. That's what primaries are all about. But I do think the Senate could be more progressive, should be more progressive, and it's something that I would absolutely work on as lieutenant governor.
Okay, and moving on then, Virginia, while it is rapidly turning to this more solidly blue color, it isn't necessarily a fully blue state yet, and it has a history of electing as a friend of mine who's from the state once put it, boring moderate candidates to statewide roles. So do you think Virginia would be ready for someone as progressive as you are in a statewide role?
Well, no one has ever called me boring. I've been called many names. No one has ever called me boring. As far as moderate, look, I'm a solid progressive. Everybody knows that. But at the same time, I've been able to work across the aisle in ways that I think would surprise some people. I mean, I talked about the Virginia Transparency Caucus, right? I did that with a a Republican senator so right wing that I've actually now called upon her to resign. But
I believe you're talking about Amanda Chase there, correct?
I am, but she wasn't quite as she hadn't said the things that she said now back when I worked with her. But the point is not about her. What it's about is that we agreed on transparency. We disagreed on everything else. Everything else. I assure you, her values are not mine. But that didn't mean we couldn't work together to make sure that every single hearing in Virginia was live streamed and archived. I just did a bill last year with Matt Ferris to protect dogs from tethering, and he wanted to protect his hound dogs, and I wanted to protect more of the little fluffy dogs we see in Alexandria. There are all kinds of dogs out there, but my point is that Matt Ferris, we are from very different worlds. He represents probably one of the largest geographic districts because his population density is thin where he represents several counties, and I probably have one of the geographically smallest districts because my folks tend to live in townhouses and apartment houses. We're in the city, so we represent very different worlds. He's a country boy, and we both wanted to protect dogs from tethering, from tying them up where they can live in terrible heat stroke or in the cold or in weather events like hurricanes. And Matt and I disagree on guns. We disagree on most things, but we agree on dogs. So part of being a good statewide leader, I think, is seeing where you can agree with people. And some issues, I'm a progressive. I'm going to support paid family medical leave. I'm going to support, gun violence protection. I'm solidly pro-choice. I want to fight climate change. But there are lots of issues. Again, domestic violence, sexual violence, protecting other from child abuse or elder abuse, protecting, animals, transparency. There are lots and lots of issues where we can come together and work across the aisle. I have a record of doing that I'm really proud of. And I got to tell you, all the places where we differ get all the attention in the news. But if you look at a session, I think you'll find that of the 1,200 bills or so that we passed last year, probably 800 of them were either unanimous or 90-10, something like that. The vast majority of what we do is bipartisan. Now, those bills never get in the news, bills that make government better. They don't get in the news because they're not sexy, they're not interesting, there's no fight there. But that's really important governing too. And I think that a good lieutenant governor has to fight for, yes, absolutely, I will fight for the progressive causes I've always long fought for, but at the same time have good relationships across the aisle and be able to work with people on issues that Virginians want, whether they be Republicans or Democrats. And one thing I'm committed to doing, of course, I've just said, is to go into every single locality in Virginia, to go into some of those deep red areas who may not have met a gay Jewish Alexandrian Virginian before, right? I'm not necessarily your standard demographic in some of these Southwest places, but I'm human, they're human, we're all Virginians. Let's sit down, let's get to know each other. Maybe they'll learn something from me. More likely, I'll learn something from them. And I think that this distance from government is something that really concerns me. Everyone is so cynical these days with, we have two worlds in the press where they say almost opposite truths, alternative facts. We need to come together one-on-one. One of the things I've always learned is that if you sit down and you talk to someone eye to eye, person to person, and just talk about their lives, right? How's mom and dad doing? Oh, mom's really sick. That's terrible. Tell me, what's going on with her? Oh, she's dying. That's terrible. Have you been able to see her? Oh, you haven't, because you have to keep working each day, because otherwise you can't, afford to feed your family. That's awful. Wouldn't it be great if you had some kind of leave to be able to see your mom as she's dying and not have to worry about surviving economically. And I think a lot of rural voters, Republican voters, might just agree to that. Now, what have I just done? I've just described paid family medical leave, but I didn't describe paid family medical leave. Oh, that's some socialist program. No, I've talked about real people in their lives, and you can see that this is something that people need. And it doesn't matter whether you're red or blue or Democrat or Republican or white or black or Latina or Southwest or Alexandrian. Everybody wants to be with their parents as they're dying. Of course you do. It's basic humanity. And I think, but some of these discussions need to occur face to face and not, from a platform at a rally. But just sitting down and chatting with people and trying to figure out the best way to design things to help them out.
Okay, and then Mark, one final question for you today. If you are elected, what is your day one piece of legislation you want to fight for as lieutenant governor?
Well, if you've been listening, you know that, and I know you have been, that I care about many issues. I care about many, many issues. My day one issue is protecting the most vulnerable, and that's a lot of people, right? We live in a society right now where half of Americans and half of Virginians they're living paycheck to paycheck. They can't pay for a $400 expense out of thin air. There's a lot of vulnerable people. They're economically vulnerable people. They're people that are vulnerable because of domestic violence and sexual violence, people that are vulnerable from child abuse or elder abuse. They're people that are vulnerable because they're black and they're not getting a fair shake and they're being profiled by police, or they're undocumented immigrants, or they're transgender or gay, or they're a kid who has a disability or autism. There's lots and lots of vulnerable people. And my view is that the people with the power, the people with the money, the people with the connections, they've got lots of people to talk to them, right? They've got lobbyists, well-paid lobbyists, and I'm not knocking these lobbyists. They're doing their job. But I'm not worried that rich, white, well-connected Virginians are going to get heard. Of course they are. I'm worried about the people who don't come to us, the people who don't know what a delegate is or a lieutenant governor is, and are just trying to live out their lives and are struggling to make ends meet. Those are the people I'm looking out for, because they don't have fancy lobbyists. They don't come to Richmond. I want to come to them, and I want to talk to them, and I want to try to be serving them, because at the end of the day, any statewide elected official, and certainly lieutenant governor, has to work for everyone in Virginia. The people are my bosses, right? They, in a democracy, they're in charge. And we got to hear from all the people, not just the well-connected. So my day one priority is to reach out to the non-well-connected, to people who are vulnerable, to people who are having a tough time, to figure out what we can do to make their lives better. And that's my number one priority.
Well, okay, and that will close us out today, folks. Once again, I am Joe Szymanski with Elections Daily. I want to thank you all for listening wherever you are and whenever it may be. And I want to thank Delegate Mark Levine for coming on with me today for maybe one of the most in-depth conversations I've gotten to have. Mark, once again, I want to thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Joe. I've just begun. I got a lot more stories to tell. You'll have to have me back.
All right, that sounds great. Once again, folks, this is Joe Szymanski with Elections Daily. Have a great rest of your day, evening, wherever you all may be, and thank you for listening.